there's the end. So let's go back. I know there's some things that were fast forward through by yourself. Let's talk about fetal remnants. So the first one is the fossovallus. Okay, so infants, when they're in the belly, embryos, they don't need oxygen through their nose, right? They don't breathe in oxygen that way. What they do is they get it through the placenta. So mom breathes in, oxygen gets in there, and then goes to the placenta, bypasses into the placenta through a membrane, and then it gets pushed into that heart. And it'll go up into the liver and up in the heart. But there's no point for high pressure of blood going through the lungs. So we'll have lungs, where is it? Right here. You can sort of see those pulmonary trunk stuff. We don't need that high pressure going on. So what happens is blood will actually travel through the fossovallus and be the foramen ovale. And so blood will move through the foramen ovale in from the right ventricle or right atrium to the left atrium, so that way it bypasses the lungs completely, and there's less pressure on the lungs themselves because they're not needing that oxygen. They still need some oxygen, but they won't need as much. And so blood will move across into that space, but then when the baby's born, they take their first breath, there will actually be a membrane that comes in and quickly snaps that shut so blood does not move over, and blood moves directly from the ventricles and the atrium on the right side of the heart into the pulmonary, into the lungs to gain oxygen, and then back to the heart. We also have another fetal remnant. There it is, right atrium across. Right here, called the ductus arteriosus. You guys remember it from lab as, anyone remember? Something like that. Basically, still too much blood is going through that fossovallus that it could damage the lungs. So we have another femoral remnant that's going to move blood from the pulmonary trunk to the aorta to get out to the rest of the body. And that will be a major help in relieving that pressure. And again, when baby takes their first breath, that will snap shut like that and make it so blood travels the normal pathway through the heart. I would highly recommend knowing those two fetal remnants. If you don't.
What's the original name for the fossovallus?
Foramen ovale. Foramen ovale.
Okay.
So, any questions so far?
Sorry. And so the only valve that the blood skips over in a fetus is the pulmonary semilunar valve?
Not quite. Because it still will go through it because you'll still need to oxygenate the lungs. Let me see if I can find a good image in here. It was in here. Yeah, it's not longer in here. Or it's somewhere up there. But basically, let's see if I can use something on your slide. That's not what I want to do. Well, now it's recording myself. There we go. But so say here we've got our box heart, okay? I don't like that one. Let's go there. Here, we're gonna make a box heart like that, okay? So bear with me, it's not the greatest heart ever, right? So we're gonna have the right AV, or right atrium, and the left atrium next to each other, right? And then we'll have the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Right here in the interatrial septum is where the fossovallus is going to be. That's where that hole is. But then as we go in here, we're going to have that pathway of the pulmonary semilunar valve where blood's going to go into it, beautifully like that. I'm just going to draw it out like this. You guys get the idea of what it is, right? It's the pulmonary trunk. Well, that's going to go up what's gonna happen is, right here in the right ventricle, you're gonna have that aortic semilunar valve. Stop it. It's gonna have the air going around like that, doing some fancy foot dancing like that. Blood will go in, but then there will be the ligamentum arteriosum, or ductus arteriosum, where blood's gonna go in that valve and go through here. So it won't bypass the lungs completely, but a majority of it will be.
Gotcha.
So is there even any blood going through the left ventricle for a fetus?
Yeah, because there will be some blood going to the lungs to oxygenate the lungs, because the cells there still need oxygen. They'll just come back through those pulmonary veins and then go through that left ventricle and then out. It just won't be as high of pressure or amount that a normal heart would deal with. Let's see. Did Eckersall talk about the zygous vein system? Everyone feels confident in it. Can we go there? Yeah, we can. So remember, there's three structures that go into the superior vena cava, right? They are the azygos, the right and left brachiocephalic, okay? The azygos is only going to be on your right side of your body. On your left side of your body, you're going to have the hemiazygous vein, and that will be normally down about after the 9th intercostal, okay? And so that will come up into the azygos and then go up into that superior vena cava. There's also the accessory, there's also the accessory hemiazygous vein, which is basically everything above that, okay? And so you'll see that come in and go across like that. Now, this isn't the only way that can form or anything. It can also come in different ways that it crosses. So occasionally, we can have the azygos right here, like that, and both blood vessels, the hemi and the accessory hemiazygos, will meet up together and cross like that. Another way that can be seen, is sometimes you will have no accessory hemiazygos, and it'll just be that whole entire azygos vein going into that azygos, or hemiazygos vein going into that azygos. It's just anatomical variation, but apart from that, know that there can be differences to the azygos system, and the azygos vein goes into the superior vena cava. If that's the one thing I would like you to know, that's the thing I want you to know is important, is the superior vena cava is getting that azygos. Like that. Okay. Did he talk about atrial septal defects?
No.
Okay, that's good to know. So, foramen valley is supposed to close when you take your first breath of air. Sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes you'll have a hole in that, oops, oh, what did I do? Hole, stop it. Hole where blood is moving back and forth. And that's an atrial septal defect. Generally they'll go in, surgery, suture it together, shut it. But that means that blood isn't getting to the lungs enough, and that generally the person is struggling to stay alive. They normally tend to be blue, those symptoms of anyone who hasn't been getting oxygen for a long time. This will be noticed in infants generally. Ventricle septal defects, hole in the septum, interventricular septum. That's normally a cognitive genetic defect, and so that has to come in and they'll suture it shut and watch it, because that wall generally is destroyed enough that they'll have to repair it and watch it to come in and take care of the problems with it. Your intraatrial is thin, your ventricular septum is thick, and so therefore it needs that thickness and can be a problem. It can reopen even after being sutured because of how strong the muscles are and how much blood force is going on. talked about heart sounds, right?
I was just gonna ask, going back to like the azygote things and stuff. So on the written portion of the exam, the lecturer was saying that we could identify like a drop of blood and like follow it through. So like I understand like all the arteries and stuff. For the when it's coming back to the heart, do we just need to know that it dumps into either the accessory hemizygos, azygos, or do we have to know like the specific veins that it passes back through to get to the like hemiazygotes or whatever?
You should know the exact veins that you're going through.
Okay.
Would it be helpful if we went through like a practice written of this?
Yes, that would be really helpful.
I'm just gonna put in a new slide.
It's on the whiteboard too.
That's true, I didn't think about that. Someone's smart in here. So let's just do, we're gonna go right atrium to, it's a good structure. Let's do the left 10th intercostal space. So if we were asking for that, we want you to start at the right atrium. Going for the right atrium, you go through which valve? Can you remember?
Tricuspid.
Tricuspid. Then through the right ventricle. Then you have pulmonary semiluna. I'm getting lazy now. And then pulmonary trunk, right? Down to pulmonary arteries, then pulmonary veins. Lung probably should be in there, but we don't care about the lung enough. We're talking about blood vesicles. Then into the left atrium, then through the bicuspid valve, to the left ventricle, from the left ventricle through the aortic, to the aorta, right? And we should be saying ascending aorta. I want to make a point that you should know each section of the aorta and what it is. There may not or may be questions on that for the exam. Okay, so understand that the ascending aorta, what comes off of the ascending aorta, the coronary arteries. Okay. Then you have the next section, which is the aortic arch, which is where the brachiocephalic, left common carotid, and the left subclavian come off of. And then you have the descending aorta, which the only thing coming off of that is going to be the posterior intercostal arteries. So we have the posterior intercostal arteries. All right, we're going through the ascending aorta, through the aortic arch, and now we're at the descending aorta, and we're going to the 9th intercostal, so we can just say the 9th, or 10th, my bad, 10th intercostal artery. So that's how we got there, right? Now going back, we go just through the 10th intercostal vein to the hemiazygos. Then from the hemiazygos to the azygos, azygos to superior vena cava, and then back to the right atrium, like that. And if you can get that down, you're gonna be golden.
Are we gonna, for this exam, be stuck pretty much in the thoracic cavity, or are they gonna ask us, hey, go to the right brachial artery?
They could. And I know Brother Anderson said that multiple times,
Yeah.
but there is a dilemma on that. is if we get there, and we can talk about this a little bit. Let me erase. I want to erase everything. Wait. So if we talked about that, and we were talking about it, we have to realize, how do we get to that right side? Right? And really, if you're looking at that, that aorta, the arch, the brachiocephalic, I don't think we talked about it that much, but the brachiocephalic immediately breaks off into two vasculature. The one is the right common carotid. The other one is the right subclavian. So from there, do you think you have an idea how to get there?
Yeah.
And then coming back, on that right subclavian, we go the left subclavian into the, no, not left subclavian, the right subclavian vein into that right brachiocephalic and then into the superior vein gateway. But I don't know how much we talked about the aperture.
So the brachiocephalic vein too.
The brachiocephalic veins from lab, remember, there were those weird things that looked on top of the superior vein gateway. But I think for the generic parts of this class, you guys will be staying mostly in the thoracic cavity. I will say for abdominal, it's fair game anywhere.
Yeah.
So we can say go to the leg, go to the arm, anywhere in the abdomen. But generically, this one you're pretty safe to say it's going to be in the thoracic cavity. Any other questions? No? Okay, let's see. What else do we want to cover? We did Claire Eckersell talk about papillary muscles a little bit, and how they work not to open the valves but keep the valves shut. Okay. Layers. Did he go in depth of going through like the skin to the lungs, the layer system there?
No, not in depth.
Not down the skin level.
Yeah. So we can start off and say, here's the skin, right there. Okay. Next, the skin is going to kind of, we'll just say some fat, right? And depending where we're at, it goes different things. Generally, we don't care about this part right here, which is the muscle. That's going to be the pec major or minor. What we care about is we hit, and we're going to go on a different color. Oops, stop it. So we're going to hit where the ribs are, and we'll have the external intercostals first. And then internal right here. And then we'll have the vein. Like that. And then did he talk about the collateral nav?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the nav right there with the innermost right there. Like that. And so it's important to realize the external, the internal are on one side. The vein, the vasculature right there, or the nerve and the vasculature right there are in that middle between the internal intercostal and the innermost intercostal. And if you're coming from the anterior side, we're going to see probably the transverse thoracic if we're near the sternum. If we're coming from the posterior side, we've hit a bunch of back muscles and then the subcostals in that lower section of the thoracic region. Any questions on that before I move forward? No? Okay. We know layers of the lungs, right? I'm feel confident in that. So beautiful MRIs, this animal. Hemothorax. Major thing, hemo's blood. Where are you gonna stick the needle in to pull out the blood?
And then ninth into
Ninth intercostal space. Also known as the diaphragmatic recess.
I can't remember, what was the relevance of the ninth intercostal space again? I can't remember why that was the spot.
So, if we look,
Because below the lung, is that what it was?
Yeah.
sort of,
Oh,
so look
yeah.
right here, it's that little
Oh, right,
space.
right.
The lungs aren't filling, but you'll still be in.
Right.
Layers, definitely know your layers. Especially next unit, abdominal, you will need to know your layers. They'll go through it quickly, but it helps. Also know these numbers, 4, 6, 8. That's where you're going to start off with your lungs at rest, and then as they go down, they'll move to 6, 8, 10. Okay, you don't need to know where that's hitting, apart from as you go further down the cage, that's where the lung is going to be resting. So if we start at, if your lungs are not filled at capacity, they're going to go 4, 6, 8 range, and that's where you can find each edge as you move around the body. As you breathe in, that's going to move down to costal ribs, and that's where you're going to find it.
Adam?
Yeah.
So as the diaphragm contracts, what's the space gonna look like that it fills? Is it kind of from like 8 to 10 and then contracts and it's just in 10? What does it look like?
So 4 right here is going to move to 6, and the 6 is going to move down to 8, and that 8 spot right here is going to move down to 10.
For the diaphragm?
Oh, for the diaphragm? The diaphragm is going to be right there connected to it, so it's going to sort of follow that as well.
Okay.
Because that visceral pleura and that parietal pleura, they're very close to each other, and when that parietal pleura is right on top of the diaphragm, as soon as that goes down, so is the visceral, which is going to pull the lung, causing it to expand.
Got it. Thanks.
See, there's an image. Here. The lungs broken up into segments. Generally, if you have cancer, you want to know which segment that cancer is in, because pulling out a lung is not necessarily the ideal thing for a patient, right? And so what we want to do is we want to break it up and cut off the small section, and that's called pulmonary bronchial something segment. If you remember the pulmonary bronchial segment part, you'll be fine. But that's the smallest amount of the lung that we can take out, and it's just one of these little sections right here that they can just cut out, and the lung is naturally divided, that they just cut out and can suture the I think it's secondary
I think it's called the apical pulmonary bronchioles.
That's, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, this was the apical, but just know pulmonary pulmonary segments are the smallest. Then you can cut out. Anything else would be either damaging the lung or a lot of blood. Everyone remember their vessels of respiration? Feel confident on that. I would definitely remember them. I highly recommend it. As someone who grades your essays. Please, it's my only hint. That handles, do we talk about the anterior portion of the wall, thoracic cavity wall? In depth. Internal thoracic arteries and everything that goes with that, and blood supply to the breast.
Cause there's some mammary branches, right?
The lateral and
medial
ones.
mammary branches.
Do you know where they come off of?
Internal thoracic and the medial, or no, lateral thoracic.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
If you know that, you'll be fine. Everyone comfortable with on-ramp, off-ramp, white, green contes?
Can you explain that just a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
I'm kinda confused on what the on-ramp, cause it's white on-ramp and gray off-ramp, right? But I'm kinda confused on what.
So if you remember from the very, very beginning of the class, we talked about the sympathetic nervous system, right? And how we would have a cell in the spinal cord, a short myelinated portion, sympathetic chain ganglia, and unmyelinated thing. So the covering of this myelinated stuff is white generally. So when we're coming from the spinal cord, it's gonna come in and be white here. It's gonna synapse in here with that cell, and then it's gonna come out and be gray going up. So that's sort of the context of that on-ramp, off-ramp, is it's coming on really, really quickly, but then leaving very, very slowly on that gray because it does not have myelin or any protective sheath to keep that quick section going. So technically, if we're talking about it, here would be the sympathetic chain ganglia with the cell body and the synapse there. Yeah.
And then before that would be the preganglionic neuron, right, in the spinal cord?
So the white would be that preganglionic neuron. This would be the postganglionic neuron. So like that. So if it's white, it's pre. If it's gray, it's post. The sympathetic nervous system. I don't think you need to know really how that operates until you get to physiology. So don't worry about more than that understanding of whites on, grays off. Okay. Everyone understand what arteries cover which portion of the thoracic cavity? Would be helpful to go over that. Okay, I see you have not. So if we're looking at the wall of the thoracic chamber, rule of thumb is posterior intercostal. Posterior intercostal does 2/3 of that wall. So if we come in here, and I'm trying to draw a nice line, but it's not perfect. And made a pie chart like that. 2/3 of this would be that posterior intercostal artery. The other 1/3 is coming from those anterior branches, which is coming off of the internal thoracic artery. So if you were asked on test, the anterior thoracic artery internal thoracic artery innervates how much of the thoracic wall? 1/3 would be that number. And that really is going to be the same all the way down. And then along with that, the internal thoracics also do those medial, mammary, arteries as well, and feed the breast.
So do the medial and lateral come off of the anterior, or no. Different.
No, so the internal thoracic comes off of the subclavian.
Yeah.
The lateral comes off of the axillary. Yeah. If you guys remember that stupid model from lab that looked disgusting and learned those stupid vasculature, right? Those three ones hanging off the axillary. That lateral comes off there and goes down. Okay. And then nerve-wise, really what you need to know is that sympathetic nerve. You're gonna have most of it. I can change the color for a little bit. Over here, most of that nerve that's coming off of the anterior ramus is going to do that whole entire innervation of the skin right there. And then you have the posterior ramus, which does those back muscles, the deep back muscles. you have your nav and your van net collateral, right? Okay. Another thing I want you to walk away with is not necessarily the number, but where you're gonna find cancer. It's gonna be in that section right there. Focus on it. If it's always gonna be in a superlateral corner in the axillary tail. Don't know why, that's just where it's normally found. Some say it's because that's where you find most of the lymphatic systems for the breast right there, which is gonna catch it. But generally, if you're gonna find cancer, it's gonna be that section. And you in depth on the breast, so you're all pretty know it. Right. Okay. Any questions? Anything you want to go over?
So as far as within the costal groove, I'm assuming the van running through that would be equivalent to that rib number. What about the one that's kind of underneath?
The nav,
Yeah, the other one.
it'll be also correlate with that costal number. Because the nav, let's see if we can get back to that photo, is literally just going to be coming off of those escutcheon nerves. So it will be like this, say, I'm just going to make this a number. Say this is the 9th intercostal area. That's going to be the 9th intercostal artery.